Hey, She Slayers, this is your bonus episode for launch day. We knew there were a few of you who just were going to want more Lauryn. I mean, like God told me, like, Lauryn, they're going to love you. They're going to want more of you. Actually, it wasn't God. It was Jordan Dooley, who's a really cool person. If you don't follow her on Instagram, I'm kind of have like a girl crush on her right now. But she was the one, she has a crazy successful podcast. And she said, like, drop multiple episodes or content on day one so people can get a good, feeling of you. And I was like, well, that makes sense. That's how I prefer to watch Ozarks and Breaking Bad and all of my favorite stuff. So anyways, I'm off topic. Okay, so we got a really good kind of like mini question that would work perfect for this to feed the minds of all of you content monsters who are listening to more. This is a question asking for like, what's my favorite content to absorb? So we're going to read that. Before we do that, I'm going to pray. This one will be even shorter because you've probably already heard me pray a couple times if you're to this episode. So, dear baby Jesus, this is the first episode where my husband and I will both be talking into the microphone and fighting over it. So please help us use our adult kind words, speak from the heart like we tell our children, not just for the sake of our marriage, but more importantly, for the sake of this episode, because if it sucks, he won't be invited back on. Just kidding. Love you, husband and baby Jesus. Amen. Okay, so let's read this question. So this comes from Jordan BDC, and it's titled, What Women Chiropractors Have Been Needing. And she rated us 5 stars, just in case you were wondering. So she says, so excited for this podcast. While Rachel Hollis and Jenna Kutcher are incredible podcasts for personal development and goal chasing, She Slays the Day is going to be so applicable directly to our lives and careers and women chiropractors. Excited for what's to come. Also, what are your top 5 books for the following categories? Dying to know, chiropractic, pediatric chiropractic specifically, personal development, and fun, lighthearted books. So here's the deal. Awesome. Love it. But I'm kind of lame when it comes to content. And anybody who personally knows me and my husband. So the joke is that, like, if you are grocery shopping in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, you are likely to run into Kirby Brunslick with headphones on. He just kind of always has headphones on, and he's not listening to music. He's listening to podcasts and books on tape. What do you listen to, like 100 a year-ish last few?
Yeah, I average about 85 a year.
Yeah, just rounding up for you to make you look good. So when we got a content question, I was like, well, I should probably have him on because he's kind of got just a different perspective on things. He tends to be a little more spiritual versus religious. So I'm nervous about what he's going to say as far as what he's listening to. So my Jesus freaks out there, please don't get offended if Kirby's reading some Buddhist book right now.
I'm not going to break your Jesus. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know, I just thought it was a good idea to have him on as early as possible because he will be on some episodes. Like some of the questions that we're getting in are a little more financy. Like somebody was like, how do I know when it's the right time to leave my associateship and start a business? And my like initial gut was like, when it feels right. And Kirby's reading the questions. A lot of times he's the one who's like sorting and organizing them on an Excel spreadsheet. And he's like, well, yeah, okay, that's not exactly it. I'm like, all right, you're right. So he's our finance guy. He's our strategy guy. He's the one who organizes and makes all the website. He is totally the guy behind the scenes and actually the guy behind the camera all of the time. He's like my little personal photographer. Thank you. And the guy behind the hashtag, everyone needs a Kirby. So without further ado, whatever.
Yeah.
My husband, Kirby Brunslick. Hi, honey.
Hi.
So, okay, before we jump in, I want you to answer one question because I know everybody's thinking it because it was the question that I obsessed over for about 2 months when we first started dating. Kirby, huh? Like, that's an interesting name. Explain yourself.
Okay, so I am named after Kirby Puckett, which, given the demographics of the people who follow us, I'm guessing they're too young to remember who that is. But he was a baseball player in the 1980s. for the Minnesota Twins, and my dad is a big baseball fan and loved Kirby Puckett. And after a very long labor where I got stuck once or twice, where I was supposed to be named, I think either Josh or Ben.
It was Ben, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was one of those two. That's what they had agreed upon. But after I came out, my dad said, "Can we name him Kirby?" And I believe the quote from my mom is,
I
"I'm
don't
tired,
care."
I don't care."
Yeah.
So that's how I got. That's how I got to be named Kirby.
Every time I hear that story, I'm just picturing like your dad holding you for the first time. So probably within 2 minutes of you coming out, your mom's vajayjay, and your mom just being exhausted. Nurse is probably still like pushing on her stomach to try and get the placenta to come out. And he's like, hey, what about instead of Ben, we name him Kirby? So, all right. Anyways, just had to answer that right away. Okay, so let's start with podcasts.
Okay.
5 favorite podcasts. I totally don't pay attention to directions. So I don't, some of these I don't have 5, some I have 7. Like, I'll do my best. So
I broke a few of the rules too. When we get into books, especially, you'll see.
okay. So I'll start. So my favorite podcast that I'm listening to, I was just telling somebody this. I love that in the podcast world, it's so not competitive. And that the whole, like, you can just like praise your other sisters for doing something awesome. So a couple of my favorite podcasts are other podcasts for chiropractic women. So the Women Chiropractors Association, the Her Story, that's awesome. They've actually interviewed a couple of my favorite chiros, Christy Wick and Denise Weber. Those are my favorite episodes. The Aligned Woman is another really good one to inspire. So there's just a couple other, I think those are like really the main ones, chiropractic specific, female specific podcasts that I'm digging. In addition to that, I mentioned her already, Jordan Dooley. She has a podcast called The She Podcast. And that's really great because Jordan is young, but she's a super go-getter. She just wrote a book, and she's very Christian. And I love any podcast that will like, especially like a super motivated, high-strung woman who will just like in the middle, just like glorify God. And I'm like, oh yeah, brings it all back. And so she doesn't like beat around the bush in that. I love that. Other than that, I would say the other one that I like whenever I'm needing like a business, like with my Blue Hills Chiropractic, my chiropractic clinic, that kind of inspiration, I like Brendan Bouchard. He's just very tactical. Is not very like feely, but it's really strategic, writing things down, like morning routine. And like, I always walk away like, oh, yep. Like, feeling better about that. So those are mine that I'm throwing out there.
Yeah, yours are that fits you, and that's definitely how you use podcasts, and I like that. I think I tend towards, if I'm looking for business or strategy or digging into spirituality, which I love to do, I tend to do that with books. For me, podcasts are almost always about funny, so most of mine are going to be comedian-y. My favorite one, and it kind of crosses that line. My favorite one is You Made It Weird by Pete Holmes. He's been doing it for years. And it's a really long form podcast. Some of the episodes, I think he has one that's like 3.5 hours. But he's a comedian. If you've never heard of Pete Holmes, go look him up. Fantastic comedy. He had a show on HBO called Crashing. Just released a book called Comedy, Sex, God. He discusses those 3 topics. He's not calling himself a comedy sex god.
I was actually wondering that.
Yeah, there's separate things, but he didn't put commas in there. But he has a great podcast. He has everything from a lot of comedians on there, a lot of actors, also a lot of spiritual people. So
big guys.
Some of the people that I'll mention in favorite books of like Rob Bell, Richard Rohr. He's had Deepak Chopra on there, bunch of great stuff, and he keeps it funny, but he also digs into everyone's concept of like, why are we here? What does this all mean? So I love his Pen Pals, which was a big inspiration for this podcast and some of the things that we'll be doing. Pen Pals is by Rory Scovel and Daniel Van Kirk. They're both comedians. And every episode, they take 2 questions and they just answer them. And they put disclaimers like Lauren will do, that they are not professionals, but they give people whatever advice they think they can give them in a really funny way, but they're super genuine and really cool guys too. Last one I'll do, because we don't need to go too far down my list, is probably Comedy Bang Bang, and that's by Scott Aukerman. It is an improv-based podcast, so there will be people in character, and it gets really ridiculous, so weird, but so funny every week. And that's been going on for a long time. I think they just did like their 600th episode. So
Okay, so I purposely didn't put. Okay, if you're not picking this up, we did not talk about our list at all. I purposely didn't put What the Fuck by...
WTF, Mark Maron. Yeah, it's on my list. Mark Maron is like the godfather of podcasts. If you know anything of the history
That's a
of
really
podcasts,
bold statement.
he popularized the form. Like, he's done over 1,000 episodes. He's interviewed anyone and everyone.
He had Brene Brown on.
He had Barack Obama on. Like, that was a big
Who's the
thing.
Frozen chick that we love? The blonde.
Oh, Kristen Bell.
Kristen Bell, that's a good one.
I mean, if you can think of an influential person in media politics, there's a decent chance he's interviewed him. And his big thing is he's really, really raw, really natural, talks a lot about his history, struggle with substance abuse, coming up in show business. He'll air his grievances with the guest on the podcast.
Yeah. Raw, that's a good word, but he's good.
For sure.
Okay, let's jump over to books. So self-development, I am like a self-help book junkie. I have probably like 6 self-help books that I haven't even read yet because I just like order them and I'm like, I'm going to read them because I know I'm going to need help. So Own Your Everyday is that Jordan Dooley that I just talked about. Again, can you tell I kind of have a girl crush on her? It's good. And what I liked about it, it was super readable. I started it on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend and was done by Monday. It was like 200 pages, short, easy to read, liked it. Then I'm rereading kind of now You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Cicero. I started to reread it. I really liked it the first time. It has such great nuggets in it as far as like how much we have like a mind fuck with money and like we're the reason that we can't. But then I stopped reading it because I felt like God, I forget what he did. What God did. I forget what he did. But he did.
Everything.
So like I started reading it and I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what I need to be reading. I was coming back from this like women empowerment seminar. And then like the next day, God did something in my life that was like this flashpoint of like, oh shoot, you're making this about money and God don't care about money. So I stopped reading it. But it is a really good book, especially if your mind is consumed with making more money, paying off debt, things like that. That would be good. Another favorite is Nothing to Prove by Jenny Allen. Oh, that is one I have read and will reread. I actually listened to that one and really wanted it in a hard copy to be like underlining. I remember the most pivotal moment of it was within literally the first 10 minutes of the audiobook. And I was running and she just goes through this really lengthy poem about like, I don't know, I'm not going to do it justice. You're just going to have to read it. But I'm like bawling as I'm running. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me. Why do I feel the need to prove? And then final 2, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. I mean, anybody whose list doesn't have Brene Brown on it, I don't trust them. I just don't. Oh, your list doesn't, but you're not a chick. And then my little like spiritual weirdness is something I'm reading now called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. I like it because it's a little more digestible than Power of Now. Like, would you agree with that?
Book?
Yeah.
It's more. It's a little bit easier to put into practice. Where I think Eckhart Tolle gets broad ranging and a little hard. Eckhart Tolle's books are usually like read them and then reread them and read them very slowly.
You read them very slowly, and so Untethered Soul was really good. A little more digestible, but still blow your mind worthy. All right, so what about you, babe?
All right, so I am not going to do the rules because I couldn't just pick 5 books and I didn't want one author to be on like 3 of the books. So I did my 5 favorite authors and I'll mention.
Oh, you're such a cheater. Okay, we'll go through fast.
Okay, I will. And if you want to know more, or you need to know more of these books, I have for the past 10 years been tracking every book I read with a star rating and how many pages it is.
Mine would be like on a Post-it note, and I'd be like, somewhere around here, I have a Post-it as my favorite quote from that book.
So if you want to, if any of these spark, or if you like my list and you want to know what other things I'm reading or what I liked and didn't like, let me know, and I can share that with whoever wants. Just message us at She Slays Podcast. So I'll switch my order up a little bit, and my first one for authors is Brene Brown. So you can trust me.
Oh, I can trust you.
That's good.
Our marriage is saved.
And I had Dare to Lead as possibly my favorite, but I also love Braving the Wilderness. She's just so vulnerable and so good, and I love that it's not just rah pump yourself up. There's real research behind it, which for me is something I really like. I like the reality of it and that it's practical. Next one is Ryan Holiday. He's written books on media, on business, on philosophy. Probably my favorite is Obstacle is the Way. The other one would be Ego is the Enemy. So he's really big into Stoic philosophy, and he takes those ancient principles and breaks them down in a way that's useful. But he also has some really entertaining and interesting business books if you're launching a product, or he has a great book about media manipulation too. That's worth checking out as well. Now we will get into the weird spiritual stuff that I love to read. Don't worry, not gonna take down Jesus by any means. Actually, both of my authors that I have on spirituality are within the church. So the first one is Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan friar, and he has a Center for Contemplation in New Mexico. And he's written a ton of books over the past several decades. He just released a new one called The Universal Christ that is definitely worth a read. I think it's a lot of mixing the traditional view of the Christian church with a sense of mysticism and experience and love that is, it shouldn't be challenging, I don't think, to Christians to open their view a little bit, and it answers a lot of questions that I had. Which is a great segue to the next one, which is Rob Bell. He is a pastor who originally led a big church in Michigan. I think he got in trouble with some of his more progressive views there, but he's on like Oprah's book club, and he had a show on like Oprah's online network for a while. His best one, or my favorite one, is Love Wins. He's really good at explaining the mystery of God in the Bible in a loving and exciting way that also kind of lets you love everyone and not put up boundaries around God. So I love both of those guys. And then final one is Nassim Taleb. He has written a lot of books on risk and business and understanding how the world works and possibly should work. And he puts his money where his mouth is because he was a derivatives trader, a commodities trader before, I think, both of the last two economic crashes, and he made millions and millions of dollars doing what he says in his books. But he's very, very philosophical, kind of that Ryan Holiday thing where he ties everything back to ancient principles and ways to live your life that also happen to apply to how you run a business or how you invest. So definitely an interesting and controversial guy as well.
Love it. Is that it? That's it. You did good. Okay, so Jordan asks for like my 5 favorite chiropractic books and then chiropractic textbooks, and I'm like, girl, I haven't picked up a textbook in like 7 years. Actually, my associate Dr. Jess and I, we were having to look for this damn orthopedic test because we were like we had like one PI claim a month, if that. And so I had to like prove that I checked this guy that he wasn't going to have a stroke. And I'm like, it's the one where you like tip the head back, and we're like two monkeys like paging through this orthopedic book. So that's literally the only orthopedic book I picked up in the last 10 years. So I've got like a mishmash of chiro books. Kirby, obviously, you don't have any. Okay, so for the students listening, Lona Cook has a book called Tell Me Where to Start. It's good. It's really good. That girl came out of chiropractic school like a bat out of hell, paid off her loans within a couple years. Like I coached with her she was my very first chiropractic coach. I love her. And so that's a great book. And I think some schools actually give it as a part of their business. It's like their business textbook as they're getting close to graduating, but you can get it on Amazon. 33 is another really principle. It goes through the 33 principles of chiropractic. It's good. It's real good. It's chiro spiritual. So also loving Heidi Havoc's Reality Check. That's good. That's deep. It's brainy. And like, I don't know, I have like low reading comprehension scores, so I have to read it really slow because I'm like, oh my gosh, what did she just say? But it's good. She is just groundbreaking for our profession. BJ Palmer's Spiritual Writings. That, it's just another one that you're like, you read it and you're like, oh my gosh, how did our profession start? Like, this was our founder. They were so deep. Like, if somebody, a chiropractor nowadays, was writing the things that BJ was writing back then, it would just be like, he'd be a guru. And I don't know what happened between then and now. And then as far as textbooks, E-Myth Chiro is a good one. I haven't read it in forever. But I was just talking to somebody the other day and they reread it and they said, like, it still stands up as a really good chiropractic book. As far as textbooks, I don't know. I got two for you. Claudia Onrig's kind of got like the main pediatric handbook one. If you don't own it, you should own it so you can look really good with it, behind you in your ROF room. And then also a book that I referenced a lot was actually the Epic Pediatric Playbook. I did their pediatric training program and that was good. It really helped because we use the Insight scanner in our clinic. And that sometimes is like, what does this scan mean? And like just pairing it with kids stuff, like Tony Ebel does a really great job of breaking that down. So that's all I got. I can't even begin to give you 5 textbooks. You got 1.5 from me. So, all right, let's finish this up. She asked for just for fun.
Should we go every other on this one instead of like full list?
Okay, you know what I'm just realizing right now is I didn't preface people with the blood meridian story. I have to tell it. It's so funny. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm in a book club and it's like quite possibly the laziest book club of all time. We meet about once every 10 weeks. And there's like 8 of us in it or something like that. And so for a couple of years, it's been going on for like 6 years. So for the first 2 rounds, I pick my book. Now, keep in mind, when this book club started, read about 6 books a year. And so Kirby's reading like 100 and he's like, oh my gosh, it's your choice. What book are you going to pick? And I'm like, I don't know. Not really sure. I'm going to look at the New York Times bestseller. And he's like,
I think you just literally both times just went to the New York Times list and picked like the number one.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's how I roll. I want to read books that other people are reading. So I can be like, oh, like, especially if it like possibly a movie is going to be made, because then I can be like, the book was better. So anyways, so he's like kind of passive aggressively complaining for years that I don't let him pick the book. So finally, like 3 years goes by and it's my turn.
I don't get to pick the book. That you guys just did the same type of book all the time, and
because we're the same type of women.
Like you never had great discussion because you didn't challenge yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I'm like, it's coming up on my turn, and I'm like, Kirby, I'm gonna let you pick the book for my turn. So he goes through this whole thing, blah blah blah. He's gonna defend this up and down, but basically, he comes down with a book called Blood Meridian, and he goes, here's what I will do to defend it. It is one of the best novels of all time. Like, everyone should read this book. It's like classic literature. There's a lot of scalpings in it, though. And I'm like, say what? And he's like, yeah, it's kind of like the first 20 pages are really gruesome. And I'm like, I am not picking this book. And so I throw it out to the book club and they're like, hell no. And so we didn't end up picking it. I don't know what I picked instead.
You didn't even go with like my number 2. Then no one trusted me.
No, you lost
then you just
your
did like a
trust.
Chick lit book that was.
Yeah. We will never again ask for your advice. Like people were just.
It's a great book though. And if you want to read a fantastic novel, it's by Cormac McCarthy, one of the greatest American writers of all time. It's an allegory about good and evil. It does take place in the American Southwest in the 1800s, so there is a lot of violence graphically described. But if you can get past the literalness and get to the symbolism, It is a beautifully written and beautifully thought out book.
So just take, Kirby's suggestions with a grain of salt, because if he says something gets a little weird, he means it. Okay. So I only have 4 fun books, so we'll go back. So my favorite book I've read in quite possibly the last 6-7 years is Where the Crawdads Sing. I don't know who writes it, but it's got an orange cover. Where the Crawdads Sing is so
if you
good.
search it, it's gonna come up.
Oh my gosh. I was like ignoring my children on vacation because I was like, I have 70 pages left in this book and I need to finish it. So yeah.
Okay. I went with the author route again, so I could cheat and put a bunch of books in.
Freaking cheater.
First one would be David Sedaris. He is a really funny writer. You've probably seen him or heard him and not realized he's on NPR a lot on Wait, Don't Tell Me. One of his best is Holidays on Ice. It's just short stories from life and mostly his life, but he just sees the humor and the touching parts of everyday life and puts them down in fantastic books that are quick reads too.
Okay. My next one is Rich People Problems. So it's okay. I don't know the author. I'm such a jerk, but it's of the Crazy Rich Asians series. So I started to try and read Crazy Rich Asians, the book, and I didn't really love it because there were so many names and I'm terrible with names. So I stopped reading it. Then I'm on a flight like home from San Diego and I watched the movie Crazy Rich Asians. And it's quite possibly my favorite romantic comedy I've watched, again, I don't know, since for Bridesmaids. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this author, because I obviously really love the movie. So I started reading the next one in it, which is Rich People Problems. And it's good. There's still a lot of names that I'm really bad with. I'm like, but it's a funny book.
You are really bad with names and following storylines.
Yeah.
Even in like movies or
shows. Oh my
gosh. Just be like, who's that guy? And I'm like, that's like one of the 2 main characters.
I don't see people's faces.
All right. My next author is Kurt Vonnegut. And his most famous book, and probably my favorite of his books, is Slaughterhouse-Five. It's not about a slaughterhouse. It's about a man who was in World War II and he time travels. And yep, it's a weird one. And Kurt Vonnegut's a weird author, but he talks about humanity and kindness in a fun and funny way. It really points out the absurdity of people, but definitely another one of the greatest American authors.
Okay. Educated by Tara Westover. I'm pretty sure that's going to become a book. Or no, it's not going to become a book, a movie. No, it was like one of the best books written in 2018. It's a memoir. It's really cool. Love it.
All right. My next one, I even broke my own rules and went into a category instead of a single author. So comedy autobiographies by women. There are so many good ones out there.
There are.
And they are so funny. Amy Poehler has
Yes.
a fantastic one that's like not only funny, but like inspiring. And she has philosophy on life and kindness.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Tina Fey,
Yeah.
Bossy Pants is really great. Eliza Schlesinger. Whitney Cummings had one, I think, that came out last year that was really good. Sarah Silverman, Amy Schumer. Tig Notaro's is great.
Oh, I haven't read Tig's. I love Tig.
Yeah, I think it's called I'm Just a Person.
Does she have a podcast?
She's on she shows up on different podcasts, but I don't think she does. She has that show on Amazon that she's probably filming too often. And then Ellen's is really good too. Ellen has an autobiography that's really funny, and same thing of like, she's so kind and interesting that it's a really good read.
Awesome. All right. So this is my last fun book. It's Becoming by Michelle Obama. So
Very good book.
yeah, it's long as hell. Oh my gosh.
She's done a lot of stuff.
I'm not going to lie. I haven't finished it. I'm only 7 hours into the 9-hour.
19 hours. Wow.
Or it's so long.
Yeah,
it's so long.
It's a very long book. She's an amazing woman.
Yeah,
Great
she's
story.
cool. And she reads it and like, it's just really interesting. Like, spoiler alert, Barack does get elected. He goes on to win a second one, but it's just cool. And I wouldn't say I'm overly democratic. And it's still like, that was my biggest concern, that it was going to be just super liberal. And it wasn't, or at least where I'm at in the book. I think you got a little, but whatever.
No, she talks about the presidency and she defends some policies and stuff. But by that point, you can tell, I think the thing you get
She's just likable.
She's really likable. She seems very sincere. And even if you disagree or agree with policy, I think you see that it's coming from a good place, that she was very, very genuine. All right, my last one. I actually only did 4. Well, I theoretically did 30, but
Yeah.
my last one is kind of a comedy nerd one. Judd Apatow, the director and filmmaker, he did. He interviewed people his entire life. When he was like 15, I think he started, and he got access to people like even Jerry Seinfeld when he was in high school by calling up their people or calling them and saying, "Hi, I'm from a paper, and I'd like to interview you for our newspaper." He meant his high school newspaper, but he got in the room with all these amazing comedians, and he just kept doing it. He's been doing it his entire life, and he put all the interviews into a book called Sick in the Head. So it's, I mean, Jerry Seinfeld, Steve Martin, Paula Poundstone, anyone you can think of in comedy, he has sat down with and had really interesting interviews, not only about comedy but about life. So that's a fantastic book and really, really funny.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully we gave you guys a bunch of things to go read and order and listen to.
Sorry, this was supposed to be a mini episode.
I
It's not so
know.
mini. We're over 30 minutes.
You're just too damn chatty. There's only room for
Sorry.
one chatty
I get
person
excited
in
when
the
people. I'm like the guy, if you're at a party and you're like just vaguely talking about something, if you're like, oh, I don't even understand what that political thing's about. And then like the policy wonk guy sitting next to you is like, oh, I've been waiting to talk about this all day. Yeah, you ask me about books and I'm going to go off.
Yeah. So if you have a short, easy question, drop it in your review because you might get your own little bonus episode dedicated to you. If you haven't left a review, stop listening right now and leave one because it means the world to us. So, all right, that's it. I don't got anything else to say.
Oh, one thing I wanted to add.
Oh my God, for real?
So it's not, so here's the thing is I want people to know that it's not just questions that they can send in. They can send in things in the reviews. They can say like, for this, I want feedback. I want to know like if these books help people, if you like it, if Jordan, found one of these actually helpful. It's not just you write a letter, Lauren answers your letter, end of talk. Like let's keep a dialogue going. Let's chat.
Okay. All right. And on that note, bye, She Slayers.